All right, we are live. I cracked the joke, which made Lisa laugh right before we got started. So, welcome to the Office Hours with a College Success Professor podcast live stream. I have a lovely guest here. We've been chucking it up before we actually got live, making ourselves look good for the cameras behind the scenes. But let me introduce my guest before we get to the questions. Did you want to say hi, Lisa, before we got started?
Yes. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be on here. I love doing these types of interviews, especially talking about career stuff during this time because it's so necessary. Not only is it necessary, but there's actually a lot more opportunity than we think they are. So I always love these topics. I love you. I love our relationship that we've built since we
Yes.
went to that Brene Brown workshop. It's so cool that we kept in touch. So
Yes, yes.
happy to
Always
be
good
here.
to get some coaching from a professional coach. So that was one of the wonderful things that we actually, when we first met, I got some free coaching, which is always great. So if you have, hello, those of you who are joining, if you have any questions, if you just want to say hi, where you're from, say hi to me and Lisa. I'm going to read Lisa's bio so you know what we're talking about today, but she gave you a little preview. So Lisa Panache, am I saying that right, Lisa?
Pachence.
Pachance. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And I'm sure you told me that a million times already. Lisa Pachance is a success, life, and leadership coach. Prior to coaching, Lisa's led a fulfilling career in recruiting and development for nonprofits, internet startups, and Fortune 500 companies. It was here that she discovered that resilient transformations can happen anywhere and at any time, given the inspirational commitments that individuals and teams make. So that was one of the reasons why I was excited to have you on the podcast today because of your back. Well, because you're a wonderful and lovely person, because you have a background in coaching, and then also importantly, you have a background in recruiting. And we have a lot of people who have graduated into this, current environment who are lost. And I thought you would be able to give them a lot of advice and tips and information based on your background, both as a coach and also as a recruiter.
Mhm.
So thank you again for agreeing to join us today.
Of course.
So when I have these interviews with people who are professionals in their field, I usually start off with the same question, and it's to tell the story about how you transition from your college life into your professional career and your actual business as an entrepreneur. So could you tell us that
Mhm.
story?
How much time you got?
We have an hour and 10 questions.
And 10 questions. So, oh man, it's such an interesting story. Of course, I find that everyone's story with where they got to where they got to is interesting. But so a couple of things that my bio didn't mention. I was recruiting at several different organizations. I was a recruiter for a nonprofit, for a couple startup companies, and then for a Fortune 500 company, Northwestern Mutual. And that's when I ran into a coach. And now I'm a professional certified coach. I work with other coaches. I work within a coach training organization to help coaches coach at a high level. So what I want you to know about me is that I am a nerd for human behavior. I love talking about careers, but not just careers, what's behind that career, what gets people motivated, what gets people interested in what they do. And it all kind of started with my college track, where I decided to get the ultimate liberal arts degree in anthropology. Oh, like who
Did you
does
get any
that? A degree in
harassment from your family
anthropology.
or friends about, majoring in anthropology? What are you going to do with? I could hear someone saying, "What do you want to do with an
Yeah.
anthropology degree?"
So one of my boyfriend's mothers said, "Oh, so you're not going to be making any money in life?" And I was like, "Oh,"
That's nice.
cried a little bit. But what's interesting about my degree is that I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go into anthropology, and I actually had aspirations to go into applied anthropology, which is essentially organizational development within. Sorry, it is. What's the name of that? It's the psychological behavior within organizations. There's a specific name for that track. But what I decided to do out of college is just get a little bit of experience before I decided to jump into a master's degree or a PhD in something. And I knew that I wanted to go back to school for something eventually, but while I was figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up after this, vague liberal arts degree in anthropology, I decided to just get some life experience. And I took the best next step that I could make. I always knew that I wanted to help people out, that I wanted to serve people, I wanted to provide resources, I wanted to help underprivileged individuals. And so I decided to go into nonprofits, and I was recruited for Teach for America. And I don't know how many people know Teach for America. It's a educational organization that goes into underserved communities all around the US and puts high quality teachers in those environments. And what they find is that with the proper education, they actually, all kids then become a lot more proficient in their skills, no matter what background. So it's this idea that the no child left behind when it comes to education.
Right.
So I was hired for Teach for America to actually be a recruiter. So I recruited teachers into these underprivileged communities, and it was a wonderful opportunity. I'm so glad that I had the mindset of, you know what, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm just going to do the next best thing that I possibly know to do. I'm going to go in the direction, like the general vicinity of what I think I want to do, which is, human resources, human behavior, helping people out, education. I ended up burning out hardcore after the first year. It was a lot of work. I was a
Yeah.
great opportunity, great experience. I loved it, but I was not good at balancing work hours with self-care. And I would go so hard for a project and then get completely burnt out and be sick for 3 days. And I just
Oh,
didn't want to
yeah.
do that after my first year out of college.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking another job as a human resources assistant at a startup incubator, which honestly was the best thing that I could have done because I got an enormous amount of experience. I got the most amazing connections in the technology and the startup world. This is back in 2008. So this is right before that
Oh,
big crash happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that when
And I,
the first iPhone came out? The tech.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And so I worked with the incubator that I worked with had places like Guilt Group and Business Insider.
Yeah.
These are big
Yeah,
organizations
I
now.
know.
And so I was able to get in the ground floor and make these wonderful connections and get great experience. And I ended up being promoted year after year until 4 years later, I was managing operations and human resources for one of the smaller startups in that incubator. And it was an amazing experience. Um, I wanted a shift into a different direction. And so I was again recruited to manage a recruiting department for Northwestern Mutual in Manhattan, which was super prestigious. It was a great job. I was there for about 2 years and was getting that itch again. Like, what do I want to do? This is a great job. It was fun, but it wasn't this is my life's purpose job. And so in my networking, I ran into a coach, into a life and leadership coach. And I was like, you know what? Let's just explore some things for a little bit. And in working with her, I discovered that I wanted to do what she was doing. I wanted to have this deep one-on-one, intimate, transformative experience with people. I wanted to be the purveyor of that. And that's when I decided to become a certified coach, and the rest is history. And currently, I work mostly with powerful women that are looking to jump into the career of their passion, not the success, not what's going to make them money or what they think they should be doing, but the career that's going to call themselves forth and call forth their life's purpose. So that's what I focus on now. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No, that was fantastic. Like all of the points that you hit are like definitely points that I wanted to talk further about. But let's start with your last point. The fact that, oftentimes when women or people in general are focused on, making money or being successful, after a period of time, they're not, happy or fulfilled in their careers. So And I think this was lower on the list of the questions that I had, but I'm intrigued, because part of my work with students is helping them to figure out that earlier rather than later, so they don't, go into their 40s or 30s, however old your clients are, finding that they're not fulfilled with what they want. So if you start that while you're in college, when you start exploring, and even when you graduated and you still weren't sure about exactly what you wanted to do, you could do that type. You could do that investigation and exploration while you're in college. That way, when you graduate, you're more directed in your path. So that's pretty much the work that I do with students. So the question
Mhm.
is, when you are working with your clients regarding helping them to figure out, what's going to bring them meaning and fulfillment in their life. Like, what are some of the techniques or strategies that you do with them to help them, figure that out for themselves? Because it's not necessarily going to come to you one day. So how do you help them to figure
Mhm.
that out?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a process. I think what we're taught in our educational system is to do what's going to be most successful, or to do the rational thing, to do the realistic thing, to find the job that's going to be the steadiest, or the most financially savvy. We're not used to looking inward and going, okay, well, what do I love? What am I good at? And then what career fits those two things? How can I make money from that?
Mm-hmm.
So we often start from the opposite. Where can I make money? Now, how can I shove my passion into that career path? And
Right.
oftentimes it creates this source of resentment. We don't want that thing. We're resentful that we have to spend our lives and working in a job that frankly we don't love. And then 10 years down the road, we have families and we're now in this job and it's harder to make that transition. We're even more resentful. And that's when the midlife or quarter life crises happen.
Yeah.
Now, nowadays, what's becoming a lot more common is this second act career, this idea that for people in their 30s and 40s, because we're now working longer and we're in jobs that have more longevity, where we can work into our 60s and 70s if we want to because of technology. We can work from home, we can do things part-time, etc. People are changing their careers pretty intensely
Yeah.
halfway through their lives.
Yeah.
Like what I did.
Yeah.
I was in
Mm-hmm.
recruiting in HR, and at 30, I was like, nope, I'm going in this direction instead.
Yeah.
So it's so important to know that at some point there's going to be some wiggle room. Like you are going to want to do something else, and that's okay too. Even if you think you have it all figured out, you probably don't. Like that's a lifelong process. And so I like to add some normalization. That what's good for you now or for the next 10 years might not be good for you when you're 30 or when you're 40 and 50. So keep that in mind. Allow flexibility. There's no make wrong when it comes to your career. People just change and evolve, and that's okay. However, when you're starting out, make sure that whatever career path you're going into is not from a should or a have to. Do not should yourself in the foot. Do not do that.
Right.
Look at what your core values are. Start to understand yourself. Learn what you love to do. What did you love to do as a child? What are some of your strengths? If you could wave a magic wand and end up in your dream career, what would that actually look like? And then work backwards from there. But I think it's so important, especially for college students and for people who have a that analytical, realistic mindset, to manage your mindset first. And this is something that is not taught in schools. We're not taught to manage our mindset.
Yeah.
We're not taught to understand our emotions or understand what calls us forth or access our intuition. All of that emotional intelligence stuff is not taught in school.
Yeah.
It's just like the cherry on top, just in case you want to have a good life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So for college students right now, to really prep them for a career path that serves them, do your own work outside of just finding the right major. So volunteer at different places, take some risks, enter organizations that you might not have thought would be ideal for you. Take some extra credit courses. I took piano class my senior year because I was like, you know what, that just sounds like fun. I've
Yeah.
always wanted to do theater, and that was another thing that was on my list to do in college. But just take some risks. go outside of your shell and start to really understand yourself in ways that are different than just the traditional, well, maybe you'll go into finance or human resources, and those are the two options, or technology.
Yeah.
I'll become a computer programmer.
Yeah.
But that's the advice that I would have. I could talk a lot more about other support structures, and I know that that's a part of one of your other questions. So I'll put a pause button on this one for now.
Okay, cool. I have one request. I was trying to figure
Yeah.
out there's something clicking, and I think it's your earrings on the speaker. So I'm going to ask my next. Yep, that's it right there. Click, click, click. Just because it'll eventually be recorded into a podcast. But while you're doing that, if you can still hear me, so take one out, put the earbud in, and then take the other one out and put the earbud in. So one of the things that when I was doing my research for the interview, I read your story on your website, and you and Michelle Obama, I don't know if you know, have some things in common. We have some things in common too. So I read her book, which usually I have handy, which I would show up, hold up. But in her book, Becoming, and when she's talking about her book, when she had that Netflix special, talking about the book tour, she's
Mhm.
talking about some of the things that you expressed with, focusing on being accomplished, focusing on doing all the right things. I think you called it as well, being a box checker, or maybe she used that term, making sure you checked all the right boxes of what you're supposed to do so that you're successful, and focusing on achievement, being an overachiever. And if you read the book, one of the things that she realized, kind of when she got with Barack, who has a very strong personality, was that if she didn't clearly define what she wanted, she realized she wasn't happy being a lawyer. And she realized that if she didn't define exactly what she wanted from her life, that she would basically be swallowed up whole, because, he's such a big personality. He had all of these goals and ambitions. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of students, especially students who are on the college track, have that, okay, I'm going to do all of these things to be, to get into my dream college, and I'm going to do all of these things right, and I'm going to have the doctor, lawyer, engineer, or tech guru career, and that's going to be how it is.
Mhm.
So, could you share about how as an overachiever or as a high achiever, how you learned to, focus on, the more important things in life, and how to focus on how students who are maybe feeling the same things, or, feeling that they have to do all the things right so that they can have a successful path. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but I
Mhm.
thought when I was reading, I was like, oh, this is exactly what Michelle Obama said in her book. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of students have the similar thing, like, if I do all of these things right, it's going to lead me to success. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter how I'm feeling, like you're talking about the emotional intelligence and being self-aware about what you really want. So how or what advice or information would you share
Yeah.
based on my long question that I just asked you?
No, that's great. Well, I'm glad that me and Michelle Obama have something in common. So when we sit down to tea at some point, we'll have a lot to talk about. But it's not just high-powered women that experience this. I think that perfectionism and this idea of needing to get things right in life it's an epidemic. It's a disease. I know for me, it ruled my life, needing to get things right, needing to do things perfect, needing to achieve. And if it wasn't perfect, if I didn't achieve things, then, well, my life was a failure. It was like perfection or failure, and those are the only two options. So it was a long, long process for me in being able to learn how to mess up, how to suck for a little bit at things. I learned this a lot in athletics. And actually, athletes are really great at this. They're great at being able to practice something over and over, not get it right, and learn from it. Deliberate practice. There's a man named Malcolm Gladwell that talks about this
Hmm.
in his book called The Tipping Point, how it usually takes someone about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to master something or to get something perfect. 10,000 hours. And we don't give ourselves a lot of room to practice, to take risks, to mess up. So, in studying people who are successful and happy in life and have those two things both, their ability to be resilient to their own emotions and their own mistakes and their own circumstances is the difference between themselves and someone who is unhappy. So this idea of needing to manage our mindset, and I'm going to talk about this over and over again in our conversation today. For college students, mastering your mindset and managing your mindset is going to be absolutely key for you, especially if you're struggling to figure out what you want, and most people are, or figuring out what the next best step is, and most people are figuring that out. So pick up a personal development book, hire a coach, talk to a guidance counselor. Like I said, we're not taught about emotional intelligence and resiliency and emotional regulation. So in order to really find the path that's right for us, you have to learn about yourself. You have to understand yourself, and you have to learn how to mess up and be okay with messing up and moving on in a powerful way. The other thing is to really get clear on what drives you. What are you intrinsically motivated by? Is it success? Is it money? For some people, it is money, and that's totally fine. For some people, it's serving others, and that was something that I had to find out the hard way. I was never actually motivated by money. I was always motivated by impact. How much impact can I have over how much income can I have? Mm-hmm. So learn what motivates you. If it's impact, if it's income, if it's a thriving social life, if it's finding joy, if it's having fun, if it's creativity, whatever it is, have that call you forth, have that lead you. There's also many exercises you can take on that will define your core values. Brene Brown has them in her book, Dare to Lead. A man named James Clear, Clear, mm-hmm. is a wonderful resource. I love his stuff. He talks about defining your core values and how to create habits that work for you. So for people who are led by this idea of, I need to have a successful life and I need to check all the boxes, start with your internal work, your internal landscape. Go there first. For people who are perfectionists, they oftentimes don't go inwards mm-hmm. at all. I certainly didn't, not until I was about 30. Didn't figure out that was the problem. And one more book that I want to recommend is Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And this is a great book to start your journey on what's really missing for you. What works for you, what kind of emotional regulation might you be missing that if you could regulate, if you could understand yourself and be intuitive, would make a difference in finding the career path that works for you. So internal first, the external will fall into place.
For sure. So I'm writing notes down here if you're wondering, like, why is she looking down? Because all of this is so important for, especially, like I said, if you are, if you're younger, a lot of students possibly don't know what coaching is or don't know the benefits of coaching. And student success coaching or life coaching for students is, because, coaching, business coaching, executive coaching, life coaching, leadership coaching, what you do, it has gained popularity over the years. But usually, students or young adults often only know about, coaching with regard to athletics. But it is slowly trickling down to the college level. So I know that there are schools, like my school is starting to create a coaching program for students. I know there are other schools across the country which are creating coaching programs for students. So I'm asking for your, as a professional coach, how best do you or do I offering this service to students at the university, how best do I explain to them what it is, the benefits of it, why and how it can help students to be successful while they're in these, emerging adulthood stages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So think of it like a sport. We all have coaches when it comes to athletics, but there's a big difference between learning a sport in the classroom and then learning it out in the real world. And telling someone how to do something is very different than coaching them through it, coaching them through taking action, getting feedback, finding out what the next best step is, and then taking action again. And that's a big difference between teaching or consulting and coaching, is that coaching will follow that track with you and help you to implement it and hold you accountable to it. Whereas consulting is just, let me tell you the 3 or 5 things. A lot of times, like guidance counselor programs will be like that. Here are the 3 colleges that I would recommend, or um, like courses on career trajectory will do that. Here are the 3 things that you need to be doing, versus let's actually sit down and create an individualized project plan with you, for you, together. And I think that that's so important in an increasingly individualized economy and society. Everyone is going to have a niche. Everyone is important and everyone is different. So finding out what those differences are and then being able to coach them through it is so, so important. Coaching also works a lot more on the internal landscape. Okay, well, what are the internal blocks that's stopping you in this conversation? What's preventing you from taking risks? What's preventing you from landing or going for that stretch job? If we take a look at how typical college students apply for jobs, it's typically, well, let me bulk up my resume as much as possible and then blind apply to this job, and oh my gosh, why didn't I get a call back? Well, there's a lot of steps in between to help nurture relationships, to help build your mentality, to help build your character when it comes to applying to these jobs. And it's really, really interesting that nowadays, I read this is a Gallup poll study, maybe in the last year, that recruiters' number one thing that they look for once they get the resume in the door is character. They hire by character first, then by experience, then by pedigree. Pedigree meaning, where did you go to school? What's your GPA? What scholastic activities make you awesome? So the first thing is character, and there's no way to do that in a classroom. The only way that you can do that is through something like coaching.
And so, since I have like many questions that are not on my page in front of me that I have to ask you. So I'm just going to ask one. I'm going to calm myself down and just ask one. So how do you, how do you show a recruiter your character as a college student? How do you get a recruiter's attention to get, noticed by someone based on your 3 things that you listed as what they are ranking for?
Hmm. Build relationships. Number one thing is to get in front of their face and build relationships. Show that you're hungry, you're eager, you're interested, you have commitment, you have proactivity, you have creativity. Recruiters love people who are proactive and professional. So if let's say you're a sophomore or junior even, it's a great idea to be proactive about contacting recruiters. If recruiters come to your school, make sure that you're building strategic relationships. You're getting to know them. You're asking questions about their organization. What is this organization like? How can I be involved? How long do people usually stay there? Are there opportunities for learning? What are the promotion tracks like? Be interested in how you can help them better their organization, but build that relationship. The best way to be able to assess someone's character is within relationship. It's not from a sheet of paper. It's not from seeing your blog or your website online. It's from having a conversation. And we're seeing more and more how important it is to go from like texting and messaging back to phone conversations and calling people up and leaving voice memos. Like, hearing someone's voice, that is the best thing that you can do. The more in person you can be as possible, safely,
Mm-hmm.
wear your mask, wash your
Yeah.
hands, the better.
Right.
Yeah, that's the best way that you can show your character. But also, you need to develop your character, work your character, hire a coach, do your personal development, talk to mentors, take programs and courses that are into mindset and mindfulness.
So before I go back to my list of questions, I have one more follow up question to
Please.
your your wonderful list of books, all of which I have read except for the Emotional Intelligence 2.0, so that's going on my list. But
Yay.
I am definitely a fan of James Clear as well and his Atomic
Mhm.
Habits book.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things I like to share with students that, once you are out of mom and dad's house and on campus, one of the first things that you need to do when you arrive on campus is to build some fantastic habits that'll make you successful so that, when everything comes at you at week 6 of the semester, you already have your routines in place, you have your habits in place, and what have you.
Mhm.
So, what would you recommend would be some really good habits for students to start working on or developing during their first years in college, or even if they're about to graduate and go into the world of careers? What are some habits that you think are important for them to begin working on and developing in college?
Oh man, that's a big question. We can spend an hour just on that. And by the way, I love James Clear's stuff. When I was working um, the Women's Pennsylvania conference last year, he was one of the keynote speakers, and I met him,
Wow.
and I was oh my gosh, it was like a kid meeting a celebrity. It was so cool. He signed my book too. Um, so James Clear talks a lot about having what he calls keystone habits. So, a couple of um, important habits in the day that other habits can rotate around. And these
Mm-hmm.
habits can be waking up at the same time every day, or it can be making sure you get 8 hours of sleep, or it could be even as small as brushing your teeth twice a day or exercising. But have a couple of keystone habits that are just for you, that you stick to, that you are rigorous about. Um, and what he says is that when it comes to forming good habits, the best thing you can do is make it as easy for yourself as possible. So, what he talks about, let's say if you want to exercise more, is just focus on the little things that help get you into action. Sometimes just putting on your sneakers switches your brain into exercise mode. And by putting on your sneakers and say, you know what, I'm going to go out for 5 minutes, when you go out for 5 minutes, you're like, you know what, while I'm here, I'm going to run for 30 minutes. And then 45 minutes later, you're like, that was the best workout ever. So make it really easy for yourself. Develop some consistent habits that help you to get there. Um, Another thing is having a consistent schedule throughout the week. So I was a D1 soccer player when I was in college, so I had a very rigorous schedule.
Yeah, I can
Like
imagine.
it was you get to practice at 6 a.m. in the morning, you practice from 6 to 7, and then you go off to breakfast in class, and then sometimes we'd have double practices in the evenings as well. So I was taught how to be very vigilant about my self care. Self care is so important in college because it teaches you how to get the fundamentals and the foundation right, so you can build everything else well on top of that. Like you can't pour from an empty bucket.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're young, it's easier to do that, but as you get older, you're going to thank yourself for forming those good habits when you're there. So create a schedule of consistency when it comes to self care, but also when it comes to things like studying. I loved to have meetings with myself, have like a meeting with this particular class when it came to doing homework that I didn't want to do. I put it in my calendar. Make sure that you have a calendar. Get a calendar, adhere to it, whatever works for you. I love to write things out.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a written calendar. Um, and also, this might be too simplistic, but have a to-do list that you take with you wherever you go. And instead of getting distracted, let's say you're working on your finance homework and you all of a sudden want to do this other thing or get distracted by something else. Instead of allowing yourself to deviate, write that thought down or write that thing down and say, okay, after 5 more minutes of studying, I'm going to go do that thing. I like to carry post-it notes with me everywhere. So when I have an idea, instead of going off and doing that or writing that email, I write it down for myself to do later. So
Mm-hmm.
this teaches you self-discipline. It teaches you to say no to yourself when the impulses come up. But it also teaches you organization and structure. So have a to-do list, stick to your to-do list, have a schedule, take care of yourself, have some keystone habits that you can come back to when your life starts to get all whirly,
Because it will.
because
It's,
it will.
it will. You know, the first, I'm working on, one of the things I'm working on for my 9 to 5 is freshman orientation or new student orientation. And so one of the things that we go over is that, you know, at in college and in life, like any transition period in your life, you're going to have, you know, a honeymoon period. Then usually something is going to happen that's going to, you know, be a shock to you, and you're going to need to adjust. So we call it the W curve, of the ups
Mhm.
and downs of college. So one of the things that we are trying to let them know is like all of the resources that are on campus. You may not think you're going to need them at the beginning of the semester, but you know it's good to have them in your back pocket for, you know, when things happen, or when, you know, you get that feedback that you weren't expecting from your first exam, and you know you got all A's and B's in high school, so what's going on? So definitely, definitely. So I wanted to go back to recruiting, if we
Mhm.
can, for a moment. Um, and you've worked at a variety of different companies, and organizations. Um, so we have students who are, you know, majoring in a variety of different things, and we did talk about the soft skills such as emotional intelligence and things like that. But based on the variety of industries that you have recruited for, could you talk about the different types of skills as a recruiter that you're looking for students to have, that they don't necessarily learn in their classroom, and how they can develop those skills that recruiters are really looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually made a list because as I was thinking about this, there were so many ideas and concepts that popped up to me that I recalled from my 10 years in recruiting. So, uh, developing skills to make yourself appealing to recruiters, it really depends on the organization and the field that you're going for. So I worked in the startup environment, in the technology startup environment. I worked in corporate, and also worked in nonprofit. So I feel like I got all sections of the pie here,
Right,
which is really
exactly.
great. I also started my own business, so there's that
Exactly.
too.
That's
Just
why
a
you were invited
hodgepodge of
on.
things. Yeah, 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 yeah. So let's start with the startups. Now, if you're interested in going into technology and going to startups, startups and recruiters from startups typically look for creativity, proactivity, being a thought leader, and thinking outside the box, because that's what technology companies have to do on a consistent basis. So wherever you can show your creativity, you can show your thought leadership, you can show your uniqueness and individuality. Do that. There was someone who was a radio station DJ for several years for like a really, it was like punk rock and folk music. It was like really random, but this was something that as a recruiter, I was like, oh, that was super interesting. Let me actually talk to this person. What was that like? So another way that you can develop those skills of creativity and proactivity is to seek out organizations where you can do that within. Are there graphic design organizations that can show your creativity? What about creating your own organization or your own project? I like to think of like what are nerdy, wacky, quirky things that you can do as a college student that's fun for you, but you can show on your resume that's different, that's unique, that is outside the box.
Hmm.
Ways to set yourself apart. Now, this could be taking a leadership role, or it could simply be carving your own path and going, "Hey, I'm unique, little wacky, and unusual. This is why you should look for me." But of course, whatever industry that you're going in, regardless, you want to make sure that you have the skills and the certifications that you need. So another way that you can do this is look at certifications that you can take outside of your school, or even within your school, in addition to the credits that you need to take. There are tons of courses out there, free courses, cheap courses on things like Udemy and Coursera that you can take and say, hey, I have a social media certification here, or I have this other thing here, that you can add onto your resume. So anything unusual that you can profile is really, really great for startups. Another thing that startups look for are people who are self-motivated. So again, any way that you can show that you're self-motivated, that you work hard, you're consistent, you're again proactive, is really, really great. So when it comes to corporate gigs, corporations typically look more for a particular profile, right? Like, do you have the pedigree? Do you have the connections? Do you have the GPA? Do you have any leadership roles? So I was the president of the anthropology and sociology club in college, which was awesome. But that was one of the things that organizations would look for when it came to me. I was a D1 athlete and I showed leadership qualities, and I got recruited by a lot of corporate companies, Fortune 500 companies, because of just purely my leadership and athletic experience. But any way that you can develop relationships, you can nurture relationships in the corporate world, do that. So I can talk for hours about how to nurture relationships, but the best thing that you can do is start with the people that you know. Ask around. What are their experience in corporate? Do they have anyone that they could potentially refer to you who could be a mentor, who could give you advice? But relationships are key when it comes to corporations because they get so many resumes. You have to get your foot in the door in other ways besides just cold applying to things. Internships are another way to do this. So the earlier that you can start internships with key companies, the better off that you will be for that. So last but not least, nonprofits. So nonprofits oftentimes will value volunteer experience over anything. Volunteer experience for nonprofits will often lead to internal hires, unless someone was referred to them. Again, I mean, a lot of jobs these days are based off of referrals. So make sure that you're nurturing your relationships, you're creating strategic relationships. But if you're interested in the nonprofit world and service, look at volunteer experiences, internships that maybe don't pay, but add a lot to your experience and to your profile. Oftentimes, heart-based or service-based work will help this as well. So I took a couple of courses down in Nicaragua when I was in college as well. And those courses combined kind of a Habitat for Humanity environment with credits, with school credits, which was super, super cool. But that was something that really raised my resume above and beyond, that I would do something like that. I would spend a college summer in another country building houses, learning Spanish, taking economic, anthropology, and geography classes. So that was something really cool. So any way that you can be of service, that you can show that you care, volunteering is really great for nonprofits.
This is all like my notepad is like completely like written on all over. This is so much good information. I'm so excited for those of you who
Yay.
are going to be watching on the replay. So we have about 15 more minutes. So I'm going to focus on my final few questions, but they are follow ups to what your advice were for those three areas that people could possibly work in. So we find in our school that students often have, they may have some of those experience that you listed. However, they have difficulty when it comes time for the interview, communicating with the
Mm.
person being interviewed about, how their service or how their leadership or how their participation in, these various activities on campus or even internships, how they can translate to a specific job or a specific position that they're applying to. So what tools or tips or advice do you have for students in how to best communicate, why they would be, based on their experience, why they would be a good candidate for the job? And oftentimes we often have students who, read the position description or the job announcement and they say, well, it says you need 3 to 5 years of experience and I don't really have that. So any advice for either one or both of those situations?
Totally. So it's super awkward, but the best thing to do is to role play interviews. That is the best thing to do. There are articles out to wazoo around what are like the top most common interview questions that you can potentially get. Make sure you have a written account of how to answer those questions and you practice it. You say it out loud. You have someone like yourself, Phoenix, read it to someone, and that person practices verbalizing their answer. I'm someone who needs to prepare for everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At least just have my ideas down. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
need a
like
clipboard. I need a clipboard.
right, right. And even if it's just jotting down a couple of ideas, that's totally fine. But when you're prepping for interviews, make sure that you have a written account of what you want to talk about and that you practice that written account, that you practice internalizing it, verbalizing it, getting comfortable with it. Sometimes it's hard to brag about ourselves, but that's what you have to do in an interview. It's not really bragging. It's information providing. It's information giving. What are my strengths and why would you want those strengths? Like, this is just, recruiters need that information. How are we supposed to know that you're really great at geometry unless you tell us this, or like this great thing that you did over the summer? We wouldn't know. Like, we need to, the other person needs to know these things. So start to get comfortable in talking about yourself in an impactful, effective way that is also descriptive. Now, a great way to do this when you're interviewing is to provide stories and examples for each answer. So let's say, you ask, what's a time, or like, how are you when it comes to overcoming your challenges in work? I'm just making up this question right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, well, when it comes to overcoming challenges, I tend to prep a lot. I tend to organize myself. And let me give you an example. I had this project down in Nicaragua that I actually spent weeks prepping for before I went down there, so that when I was there, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
a great way to convey yourself is to tell stories and to practice telling those stories of examples when you can back up those answers. So that's a role playing, prepping is a great thing to do. Yeah, I'd say that's the number one thing when it comes to the interview, but also little things like making sure that you feel good in yourself, that you feel good in your clothes, that you feel comfortable, that you don't, have a mask of makeup on when you usually don't wear makeup. Make sure that you are comfortable, that you're fed, that you're hydrated. Simple things like that. Practice your handshake. Yeah. Practice your handshake, practice meeting people in the eyes. And last but not least, smile. People forget this in interviews. Oh my God, please smile. Like, show that you're happy to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, it's so easy for people to get serious during interviews, even on the phone. So even on phone interviews, make sure that you smile, because people can hear that
Mm-hmm.
smile and hear that happiness and that excitement and that hunger through the phone. That is the easiest trick that I can give people to set them apart. Smile.
Yes, yes. So while you were talking, I was on Instagram. I believe it was on Instagram earlier today, and I saw a really funny post that brings to mind, I think, the second part of my question, which was, and it's controversial, but I'm going to do it anyway. So it was a post about Kanye. I don't know. I assume it's true that he said he was Kanye West was running for president, and so the post was a career related post, and it was
Excellent.
um, Kanye, basically Kanye running for president is basically proof that men are more inclined to apply for jobs that they're not necessarily qualified for, whereas
Mm.
women need to check every single box regarding the job description in order to feel that they should apply for a job. So, do you have any advice for students who, I believe, as I said earlier, they feel that they're not qualified or they don't have enough experience based on what the job announcement is saying? For any strategies or tips or advice that you have for them from the recruiter's perspective?
Yes. I was reading a great book called Permission to Feel by Mark Beckett. And there's a study in there that, and I apologize, I forget the exact specifics, but men were most likely to over project and under serve, and
Mm-hmm.
women were much more likely to under project and over serve, meaning like sell themselves short, but then be able to perform better than what they think. So the bars are different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know how much I want to go into the gender specific differences, but I would say when it comes to applying to jobs and putting yourself out there, make sure that at least 25% of the jobs that you're applying to are stretch jobs uh, in your perspective. 25%.
I
So
love it.
that leaves 75% jobs where you feel like you're good fit, which is great. Give yourself plenty of room to get them jobs that are a good fit, that you feel like you're qualified for, but 25% should be jobs that are uncomfortable for you, that are risky, that are stretches. Now, when you're applying to stretch jobs, again, I emphasize making sure that you're building relationships with those people that are in that company. So if you have a relative or a family member or a friend that works in that company or had worked at that company, reach out to them and form a relationship, build a conversation with them. That's a really great way to do that. But I think that like we always need to be taking some risk. We don't know what we're capable of until we challenge ourselves to do that, and that goes for people who are still college students too. Take risks in school. Look at what might be uncomfortable. I like to say always have one project going that is a stretch project. So whether it's one class that's a stretch class or a organization or a project that's a stretch project, make sure that you're going outside the box and you're challenging yourself in at least one area of your life always. Maybe not always. Take some vacation, take some time off,
Yeah.
but stretch yourself. We always need to be moving our comfort zone because our comfort zone is like a rubber band. It will shrink unless we're constantly working it and flexing it and making it bigger.
Excellent advice. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
For my, no matter what your age is, whether you're in college, whether you're, grown up like me. So I appreciate that advice. So I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to let you talk about what you have, for people who may be interested in working with you.
Sure.
So we are in currently social distancing era or world. So do you have any tips or advice for using social media like LinkedIn or other platforms for connecting with recruiters, or just basically you talked a lot about networking, building relationships? Any advice for how to do that in our new, online environment that the majority of us are, operating in right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been a virtual business owner for 7 years. So I've gotten real good at virtual networking and building relationships virtually. Almost all my relationships are like that right now. And I'd say that building relationships virtually is not that much different than building relationships in person. You want to get in a group of people, connect with a couple of those people within that group, let's say a networking or a book club or whatever it is, and with those two people have one-off conversations with them, get to know them, ask questions, actively listen, be curious. It's pretty simple, but I think it's easy to overcomplicate it because the environments have changed, although the ways that we build relationships have not changed. All you're doing is connecting with someone, you're relating to someone, you're getting interested in them, you're getting them to talk about themselves, and then you're relating some more and having follow up. Um, so I'd say that there's a lot of ways to virtually connect with people. You can join groups in LinkedIn, you can join groups on Facebook. Make sure that you're posting, that you're commenting, that you're reaching out to people and saying, I've loved that post. I'd love to talk about this a little bit more. Or on LinkedIn, hey, I noticed that you worked for Google for a little bit. Would you mind if we had a virtual coffee together and I asked you a couple of questions? Um, Make sure that you're being respectful of people's time, of course, too. But most people like to talk about themselves. They like to know that they are an expert in someone else's eyes. That's great. It's flattering for people. I love when people come to me and they're like, I want to be a coach. do you mind if I pick your brain for a little bit? And I'm like, sure, I have 50,000 appointments on my calendar, but I will make time for you. That is
Right.
flattering.
Right.
But people want to know that they are impactful. So don't hesitate to reach out. Build your network on LinkedIn, build your network on Facebook. Instagram isn't so great at professional relationships. It's much more about social and fun. Uh-oh, looks like something froze.
Mhm. It
Still
kicked me
there?
out of a Zoom meeting earlier. So, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Can
yep,
you hear
you're
me?
back.
Okay. Yeah. It kicked me
Yep.
out of a Zoom meeting earlier. So I know it's my internet. So I was like making sure, hoping it didn't happen. But yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I heard you
No,
the
no,
whole
no, it's
time,
all
though.
good.
I heard you the whole
Excellent.
time, though.
Excellent. Um, so the last thing that I'll say is there's a lot of virtual organizations out there right now that you can be a part of. Volunteer places. Philadelphia has a whole list of places to volunteer at that are in need right now. I think a lot of people think that because we're in a pandemic, these organizations like homeless shelters and the Rotary Club now don't have need. They actually have more need
Yeah.
right now. So partake in those organizations, sign up for some things, join some boards, look at other organizations in your area that might have need and start to build some connections there. There's a lot of networking clubs out there too. I always find it really interesting when I see someone in college uh, who's circulating at one of these networking opportunities. But there's a lot of virtual networking right now. I bet you if you go on Facebook and you ask about it, you're going to get a lot of comments. And same thing with LinkedIn, you'll get a lot of comments. Virtual happy hours, virtual
Mm-hmm.
networking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's become really, really important.
Yeah. I've participated in I think two already this week. So
There you go. It's a
they're
great way
definitely
to get
out
your name
there.
on
They're
there.
definitely out
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put your website up. There it is. For
Yay.
those of you who are interested in working with Lisa, as you can see, she is knowledgeable about all different areas of life and can definitely help you. Do you have anything in particular that you're working on that people can, work with you?
Yes, absolutely. So I always have my VIP program where I work with people between 3 and 6 months on whatever project that they're working on. Now, for college students, that might not be affordable. But what I do have for college students is a package of 4 sessions with me that's specific to finding their dream career. So, those 4 sessions, we look at defining your core values and what you really want, developing how that actually works in the real world, like how that vision will apply in certain career paths, and then we build out a strategic action plan for what that looks like, how to get that career. And then we create a system of accountability and structure, and we role play and we practice. So those are the 4 sessions that I provide to college students. And I provide discounts to college students who are interested in working with me as well. So there's that. I also have a Facebook group called Coaches Creating Community. So if you're interested in personal development, if you're interested in learning more about the coaching environment or about how to get into personal development, that's a great group to go into, and it's Coaches Creating Community with a capital UNITY.
Let's
Yep.
see if I did that right.
Yes, you did. Oh, that's so exciting. I love that pop up. Yep. And then outside of that, I also produce webinars and panels for my Facebook group, recorded webinars and panels that talk about so many different things. And there's one panel in particular that talks about how to create your career during COVID. So, in that panel, I brought on 2 other recruiting and career coaching experts, and we talk about how to actually create your career during COVID. So make sure you join the Facebook community, reach out to me. You can also sign up for my freebie on my website, coachingwithlp.com, and reach out, and I'll go ahead and send you that panel.
Well, thank you. Oh, we are exactly on time. It's exactly 6:30.
Yay!
Well, thank you so much. This, like I said, the information that you shared during this presentation, like blew my mind. And I've worked in higher ed for a number of years, and the advice and the tips that you've given those who are watching the replay or those who are watching live, for how to, set themselves up for success, while they're in college and after they graduate, is like what my mission is all about. So I definitely
Mm,
appreciate all of your valuable expertise and all of your insights. As you can see, for those of you who just watched this interview, Lisa is knowledgeable about a variety of different areas, and she will definitely bring that expertise to working with you. I've talked to her on a number of different occasions. We met in actually the Brene Brown leadership, what was it called, the Dare to Lead
Dare to
training.
Lead workshop.
Yeah, the
Yes.
Dare to Lead workshop, which was what, 3 days online.
Mm-hmm. A
So,
lot.
yes. So, she's an expert. She has a lot of information, a lot of resources for you also. She has my two thumbs up approval. She's an avid reader like I am. So, a person is good if they can like quote books during a conversation and let you know what books to read. So I think I just added two more to my list of things to read. So again, thank you so much. Very valuable, really, really good.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I love what you're doing. I love talking to you. You make me feel so warm and welcome.
So you can let the cat out now. I'm going to end the
Yeah,
broadcast.
my cat's breaking into my office again. All
All right, so we're going to end with a laugh like we started with a laugh. So I'm going to stop the live
Yeah.
now.